Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next panel. My name is Warren Sack. I'm Associate Faculty Director of the Data and Democracy Initiative. We have several panelists today. The first is Laurenellen McCann from the Sunlight Foundation.
Thank you very much. I think I'm in mic range. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you for the next little bit of this afternoon. I'm excited to get to the interactive portion. As was just mentioned, my name is, I'm slightly shorter also, I'm Laurenellen McCann. That's one really long first name, and I'm the National Policy Manager at the Sunlight Foundation. Sunlight is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., and we're named for a very famous, in some circles, adage by Chief Justice John Brandeis. Sunlight is the best of disinfectants, electric light, the most efficient policeman. We've taken this to heart with our work, which combines a focus on technology and advocacy to help improve government transparency. And the reason why we're so excited about the internet is because the internet happens to be the key to a lot of things for both government and for people. We've talked about this from the business sector's perspective today, but allow me to introduce the following candidates who will all be talking about how nonprofits play a role in this world. So many of you are probably familiar with this study from 2009 from Pew, which answers the question, where do people go to get information about their government? About 40% of them turn online. This is part of the reason why we think when we're talking about the modern era of public information, you have to be talking about online information. If a government is trying to make information available to the public, this kind of amorphous mass of people, it has to go where people are actually going. And increasingly, that's online. Remember, this study is from 2009. It's unavoidable that the number's gone up over time. How this translates into actual, tangible work for Sunlight comes at a couple of different angles. For one, I represent our policy shop. We are actively trying to make policies that improve technology for transparency accessible for governments and for advocates interested in this space. We also do a lot of press outreach to encourage reporters to write about these issues and to use data in their reporting. And we also train reporters how to do more data-driven journalism and to kind of feed that need for data from a number of different government jurisdictions. But the biggest piece, and maybe why you've even heard of Sunlight before, is that we also play a lot with the technology side ourselves. We not only try to help governments literally open up their data from the technical perspective, we also engage with that kind of openness ourselves. So I'm going to talk about today one specific case example, Open States, in part because most of Sunlight's work has been federally focused until pretty recently. We started an international program in 2012, and at the top of 2013, with funding from Google.org, we just launched a new municipal focus. Through it all, Open States has existed. It's a 5-year-old project. And in the course of 5 years, we managed to open up state legislative data from all 50 states and the 51st, which is D.C., and Puerto Rico. And we're talking about legislative data. We're talking about the nuts and bolts of the actual legislative process. So these are actual screenshots from the Open States platform, which you can find at openstates.org. You'll see at the top there that you can follow the process from when legislation is introduced, when it passes Assembly, when it goes through the Senate, if you are not a unicameral House on the state level. You can get the full bill text. And I want you to understand how novel this is and how hard it is to get full bill text from state legislation across the country. It's so hard. Thank you for the applause. You can also see who co-sponsored it. Again, a novelty. These novelties that we never have the chance to consider or think about because for us they are so intuitive and obvious, like the fact that you should also be able to see information about the votes, how it was voted, how it breaks down upon party lines, and then any other information associated with it. Sometimes we collect media mentions, et cetera. And I just want to particularly highlight when I talk about bill text, recent legislation passed from your representative from this area, which I'll show you in a moment, about the status of Jackie Robinson in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yes, we can look at what Nancy Skinner, who's, as I understand, the Berkeley local rep, has been recently co-sponsoring, and that means that we can also look at specific information about Ms. Skinner. We can see her bio, which we've pulled from a number of different sources, including her profile on the actual state website, as well as Wikipedia when we need to patch in certain gaps. We can even see her campaign contributions. And this pulls from another platform that we run called Influence Explorer that is primarily looking at contribution data. Another novelty, you can find her office. You can find both her capital office and her district office. You can see information about her district, and the list goes on. All of this should sound maybe even a little boring, but again, I want to highlight how exciting this is and how new, because from every single state, there is an entire range of the kind of information that you would get if you actually tried to go to that state legislation's website. They even have multiple properties, so you have no idea in some cases whether you're looking at their correct website. That's also why it took us 5 years to create this, and we didn't work alone. OpenStates was a project that was driven through a crowdsourcing effort through an email community list that's active. In fact, the latest email was just sent out on Monday. And so we worked setting up scrapers for all 50 states and DC and Puerto Rico with people who are actually living in those states and who are actively solving problems about how to make that data better. It was a huge standardization effort. It was something that now we've released all this data open, and as an earlier slide mentioned, in an API so that it can be fed into other platforms. But the reason we did this isn't just kind of an academic proof of concept, nor are we trying to replace governments. We wanted to see what we could do if we actually improve the data, and then we wanted to create tools that would allow governments to make actions on their own to improve this data as well. So we released an open data legislative report card. The reason why, and we're not necessarily a big report card organization, but the results of this, which again is pretty wonky. I mean, when we're talking about the machine readability of the data, we're pointing fingers at whether you're choosing a PDF or an image file PDF in terms of what you're delivering. The reason why I have here Jim Polito, a Fox commentator, is because some of the results of this information was my favorite news clip in all of history. Because at Massachusetts, on primetime news, they got to have this flashed on the screen. Yes, this is a commentator freaking out about the fact that roll call votes were missing, that the data is not in good formats, that it was locked in a PDF, as though people like my mom, who I love dearly and has been using Photoshop since version 1, would actually know what it means to have data locked in a PDF. It took for granted something that we've been taking for granted as we're talking about this data, and that is amazing to be taking for granted together publicly, because this is what the futures look like. We're going to have popular commentators on TV talking about the fact that we have limited data access because before 2009, it was in somebody's basement somewhere. It's a lovely future. It's something that we're trying to explore how to expand what's possible with as well, as we use OpenStates as a platform for other kinds of iteration. So, for example, we're looking at how the OpenStates legislative framework could apply for cities. These are two instances, although also Oakland has another instance of a platform called CouncilMatic. You can see Philadelphia's and Chicago's on the screen. Each of these is separately scraping legislative website from the cities to create similar parallels. Full text of legislation, information about the sponsors, issue tags, so you can actually search and surface the information appropriately. If they had a data input like OpenStates for municipalities, we could see this not just in Philly and Chicago and Oakland, but in my hometown, which is about 8,000 people in the middle of the woods in Connecticut. This is what we think is the power of our combined approach for opening data, that we will try and do it ourselves anyway, and then we'll backtrack and try to help governments do it too. Similarly, another platform that OpenStates feeds into that I just want to highlight today is Scout. Scout is another Sunlight platform. It takes information from federal regulations, from state legislation through OpenStates, as well as congressional inputs, so full text of Senate and House legislation, and also the congressional record, which is what our lawmakers are actively seeking on the floors. And it allows you to track this information based around specific interests. We haven't had the ability before to look at legislation on the state level and the federal level at the same time. Again, it's novel. We think we could just go into Google and find this, but you can't. Well, now you can, but you couldn't before. And that's the kind of innovation, when we throw around this word innovation, that we should be thinking about. I love bus apps. I love the ways in which we are taking all these different kinds of data and seeing ourselves reflected in it. But we also have to have conversations about process. And it's not always the most exciting because it also shows, I think, a lot of the holes in our own knowledge. But this is why we need to work with policymakers too. And on that note, I'll just end by highlighting a tool for policymakers that's not a traditional tool. in response to a lot of the open data policies and legislation that we've seen growing over the last couple of years, in particular since 2009. Sunlight went and created a best practice resource for actually approaching both the kind of capital O, capital D open data policies and policies that are trying to just release information better. So we've talked a lot about education data. You should be able to have a bill about education that might have a comment on disclosure, and then to be able to insert language about best practices there. It doesn't always have to be a full open data initiative. But because those are really complicated needs, and a lot of these are very complex questions, and some of them have conflicting information from existing retention schedules and public records laws, we have to be pretty thoughtful in how we're crafting the policies that are going to update what needs updating and then advance this pressure and this ability to release information, kind of help usher in the cultural shift for governments to actually hit the publish button. That's our hope by creating these guidelines so that states that had received their F grades, like poor Massachusetts, and their D grades, like California, are able to find action steps that fit their bureaucratic needs as well as our technical needs. This is my current spiel. I look forward to talking with you in questions. And in case you want to look through any of the resources I just discussed, you can head to sunlightfoundation.com. Thank you.